Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to inform Parliament about Fiji's green bond, an innovative financial mechanism for raising funds specifically targeted to address the combined challenge of climate adaptation and mitigation in Fiji. Madam Speaker, the adverse impacts of climate change limits the socio-economic development of our nation and indeed all other nations, and continues to be an obstacle for Fiji's development aspirations as articulated in the 5-year and 20-year National Development Plan. Madam Speaker, we know too well from our experience with recent disasters such as TC Winston that the financial burden of fortifying our nation against climate change is disproportionately put on the public sector. For example, to date, the Fijian government has expended a sum of Fijian $127.1 million to assist 37,000 Fijian families to rebuild and complete their homes. This is only the assistance under the Help for Homes initiative, Madam Speaker. The damage sustained in Winston was almost a third of the value of the Fijian GDP. Imagine the impact to government finance and how this limits spending on other competing national priorities such as education, health and social security. Madam Speaker, while we are grateful for the flows of climate finance to the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund and other sources, these are not enough to bridge the gap between existing climate finance flows into the country and what is actually needed to make Fiji climate resilient. Madam Speaker, we informed the House last Monday of what our climate finance needs are, at least to climate-proof our public buildings and infrastructure over the next years through the recently launched Climate Vulnerability Assessment for Fiji. Madam Speaker, interventions in 5 main areas alone. 1, building inclusive and resilient towns and cities. 2, improving infrastructure services. 3, climate-smart agriculture and fisheries. 4, conserving ecosystems. And 5, building socio-economic resilience requires financing estimated at Fijian $9.3 billion over 10 years, plus additional maintenance and operational costs and social expenditures. But Madam Speaker, the Fiji First Government believes in overcoming difficulties through ingenuity and innovation. We are not resting on our laurels. We believe in market mechanisms and the strength of the Fijian financial market, underpinned by unprecedented growth rates. It is with this resolve we resorted to issue a green bond to bridge the climate finance gap, and strongly believe that by issuing a green bond we'll be able to minimize climate-induced fiscal shocks and crowd in sufficient climate finance, particularly from the private sector. Madam Speaker, before I present on the specifics of Fiji's green bond, let me provide an overview of the role of green bonds to give a bit of context. Madam Speaker, green bonds are fixed income, liquid financial instruments used to raise funds committed to environment-friendly projects. As in Fiji's case, this includes specific investments in climate mitigation and adaptation. They are traditionally issued by private banks and institutions like the IFC. But more recently, we've seen a number of governments issue or have the willingness to issue their own green bonds or sovereign green bonds. Madam Speaker, the attractiveness of such green bonds is that they provide investors with an attractive investment opportunity, which at the same time supports climate-smart and socially sound initiatives. Sovereign green bonds, Madam Speaker, are similar to the conventional infrastructure bonds that Fiji has utilized for many years. However, the difference is in the concept that green bonds have a specific purpose of investing the funds raised in bringing about positive climate and environmental benefits. Madam Speaker, the global green bond market is experiencing rapid growth with over 1,500 issuances in 2017, valued at over US $150 billion, almost twice the amount issued in 2016. Madam Speaker, needless to say, the world is fast realizing the incredible benefits of using bond instruments to finance climate initiatives, and we, of course, ourselves must capitalize on this opportunity. Fiji's own green bond does precisely that. Madam Speaker, given that the opposition has failed to perhaps understand and appreciate the innovative and practical actions being taken by the Fijian government to address climate change in the domestic, regional and international front, I would now like to inform Parliament of the details of Fiji's green bond. Madam Speaker, Fiji is the first emerging economy in the world, the first country in the Southern Hemisphere, and just the third globally after Poland and France to issue a green bond whereby the proceeds will go towards climate mitigation, adaptation and environmental protection projects. It's no minor feat, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Fiji, as part of its COP23 presidency, had the vision to source adequate climate adaptation finance for vulnerable countries, and with this green bond is at the forefront of the global community. Madam Speaker, following the decision to issue a modest Fijian $100 million green bond during the announcement of the 2017-2018 national budget, a Green Bond Steering Committee was formed to spearhead the development of Fiji's Green Bond Framework, undertake necessary preparatory work, and administer the green bonds. Madam Speaker, the Steering Committee is chaired by the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, Mr. Arif Ali, and includes the Deputy Solicitor General, Ms. Tracy Wong, the Head of Climate Change, Mr. Nilesh Prakash, and the Head of Treasury, Mr. Pankaj Singh from the Ministerial Economy, and representatives from the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank. Since its formation, Madam Speaker, the Steering Committee has successfully developed Fiji's Green Bond Framework, which is the basis on which Fiji's Green Bond will make investments and details of which are contained in the Green Bond Prospectus. For those who may not know, Madam Speaker, the Fiji Green Bond Prospectus is a legal document that informs potential investors about the type of investments, modalities and reporting procedures associated with Fiji's Green Bond. The Green Bond Prospectus, Madam Speaker, the Green Bond Framework and other relevant documents can be accessed through the Reserve Bank of Fiji's website. Madam Speaker, following the successful completion of all preparatory works by the Steering Committee, Fiji launched its first Green Bond on the 1st of November 2017. This was in record time, since the decision to issue the Green Bond was only announced in June of that same year. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to inform that the issuance of Fiji's Green Bond attracted overwhelming interest from both local and foreign investors. The participation rate recorded was 3 times that normally associated with Fijian government infrastructure bonds. It was also the first time we had foreign investor participation for Fijian dollar-denominated bonds. Tenders for the first tranche of the issue were oversubscribed, with a record Fijian $87 million received. Importantly, we witnessed a greater diversification of the investor base, which is very critical. Notwithstanding the oversubscription, Madam Speaker, in consultation with the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, only 40 million Fijian dollars was accepted as part of the first tranche. Following feedback from the commercial banks for the first issue, 2 different maturities for the green bonds were issued. 5 years, first 5 years with a 4% coupon rate, and secondly, a 13-year with a 6.3% coupon rate. For Fiji, the interest from the commercial banks demonstrates significant private sector support for green initiatives. Commercial banks in Fiji, Madam Speaker, do not typically participate in government securities tenders due to their portfolio and maturity requirements. However, for this issue, they put in a combined tender amounting to Fijian $40 million. Given that the tender was oversubscribed, a total of Fijian $13.27 million was allotted to the banks. The commercial bank's interest in Fiji's green bond shows there is an institutional appetite for such green bonds and indicates the private sector's willingness to partner with government and invest in such financial products. Madam Speaker, additionally, the tender subscription included an overseas investor, the first time for locally issued government securities and indeed in Fijian denomination. And with the banks participating in the issue, Fiji's green bond has definitely achieved its promise of coordinating public and private sector activity to combat climate change. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, the second tranche, containing the 13-year tenor green bonds worth Fijian $20 million, was issued on 28th of December 2017 and was oversubscribed again with a total of Fijian $31.5 million. Madam Speaker, the oversubscription indicates great confidence in Fiji as a nation, confidence in its economic and financial stability and creditworthiness, and indicates tremendous support for our efforts to address climate change. The Green Bond, Madam Speaker, also gives Fiji access to a much broader field of private climate finance, building on the public climate finance we have received already from the Green Climate Fund, or GCF, and the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, amongst others. As we move forward, this will create many more opportunities for Fiji to attract investor interest in our country. It also further evidences the desire for investors to diversify their investment portfolios towards sustainable development investments, especially in vulnerable countries. In this regard, we hope that Fiji's Green Bond can be a template that other vulnerable nations can learn from and indeed replicate. Madam Speaker, I'd like to also note that IFC and World Bank will be launching a Green Bond Guide in London next week that will feature the successful Green Bond issued by Fiji, which will serve as a lesson for other countries. Madam Speaker, we plan to issue the remaining Fijian $14 million of the Green Bond in 2 further Fijian 20 million tranches. The next Fijian 20 million tranche will be issued in April, and the last Fijian 20 million tranche will be issued in the middle of this year. Madam Speaker, let me now highlight some key facts about how the Fijian government has utilized the Green Bond proceeds. Madam Speaker, proceeds from the Green Bonds are put into a special ring-fence account which can only be used for climate mitigation and adaptation projects identified in the 2017-2018 national budget. Madam Speaker, with the Green Bond framework aiming to promote environmentally sustainable actions now and in the future, eligible projects should fall into 7 eligible sectors, which are as follows. First, renewable energy and energy efficiency. Number 2, resilience to climate change for highly vulnerable areas and sectors. Number 3, clean and resilient transport. Number 4, reducing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Number 5, water efficiency and wastewater management. Number 6, sustainable management of natural resources. And number 7, eco-efficiency. Through extensive analysis and data mining, Madam Speaker, the Climate Change and International Cooperation Division, together with the Treasury Division of the Ministry of the Economy and members of the Steering Committee, compiled a list of projects from the 2017-2018 national budget eligible for green bond financing. Madam Speaker, a total of 86 projects with a value of Fijian $434.9 million met the broad categorization set out in the Green Bond Framework. Of this, 71 projects with a total value of Fijian $417.6 million were climate change resilience or adaptation related. Madam Speaker, rehabilitation and construction of schools damaged by Tropical Cyclone Winston, rehabilitation and upgrade of roads, bridges, jetties, including works related to waterways, constitute a major part of the climate change resilience or adaptation budget of Fijian $417.6 million. The remaining 15 projects, Madam Speaker, were climate change mitigation projects valued at Fijian $17.4 million. Renewable energy development, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, including the construction of landfill, are some of the major climate change mitigation projects identified. This reminds us that despite contributing insignificantly, I should say, to global emissions, Fiji is committed to mitigation of its carbon emissions. Indeed, as we gave an undertaking, we'll reduce our carbon footprint by 30% by 2030. It is interesting to note, Madam Speaker, that the categorization of eligible projects as adaptation and mitigation is skewed largely towards adaptation projects, as expected. This is a stark reminder of how critical it is for Fiji to adapt to climate change. This is a unique feature of Fiji's Green Bond as compared to other green bonds. Its focus on adaptation and climate resilience projects. Indeed, Madam Speaker, if you look at countries like Poland and France, their entire focus, or predominantly the focus, is on mitigation. Madam Speaker, the government is unwavering in its principles of accountability and transparency. Fiji's Green Bond framework is guided by the internationally developed Green Bond principles, which sets out guidelines for best practice that include first, the use of the proceeds, 2, process for project evaluation and selection, 3, management of proceeds, and 4, reporting. Madam Speaker, we have engaged a world-class external independent verifier called Sustainalytics to provide a second opinion on our Green Bond framework and environmental credentials, which confirms that the framework is credible, transparent, and aligns with the core aspects of the internationally recognized Green Bonds principles. Madam Speaker, this is very, very critical, because if you have an independent third-party validation, then people who want to invest know exactly where the money has gone to, and this is verified by a third party. The second opinion, Madam Speaker, provides added confidence to investors that Fiji's green bonds, as I highlighted, are reliable and directed solely towards eligible green projects which have been established and independently verified to have clear environmental benefits. These projects, Madam Speaker, promote the transition to low carbon and climate resilient growth. Madam Speaker, the Fijian government will also provide an annual progress newsletter and impact report on projects funded using the green bond proceeds. These documents will be made available to investors and posted on the Reserve Bank of Fiji's website for public access. Compared to larger developed countries, the scale of Fiji's green bond and its projects in terms of capital is much, much smaller. Fijian $100 million in total, which is approximately US $50 million. But Fiji's green bond, Madam Speaker, is an example of the ability of smaller economies to issue a green bond to address climate change, which is affecting the world over, especially small island states, including, of course, in the Pacific. While larger developed economies issue green bonds on a larger scale, such as Poland is mentioned, Euro $750 million, France $7 billion, Euro 7 billion, and Belgium Euro 4.5 billion, it is possible for emerging and developing economies such as Fiji, and as recently announced, Nigeria, US $30 million to issue green bonds on a smaller scale. Madam Speaker, the truth about green bonds is this, Madam Speaker, that green bonds are an efficient, affordable, credible, and secure way of financing the immediate climate needs of our country. Madam Speaker, if we are to protect our country from climate adversities that reverse decades of development in a matter of hours, then we must invest now. If we are to prevent fellow Fijians from falling into poverty due to climate adversities, then we must, of course, invest now. If we are to ensure that our future generations have access to natural resources and live healthy, prosperous lives, then we also must invest now, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, put simply, green bonds are crucial investments to secure Fiji's future against the adversities of climate change. Madam Speaker, let us not only think of ourselves as being the most vulnerable, but also let us think of ourselves as pioneers who decide our own fate in the battle against climate change. We must let the world see Fiji as the most boldest, innovative leader in adapting to climate change, indeed, notwithstanding our size. As a country that is vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, Madam Speaker, Fiji has set an example to other climate-vulnerable nations in finding new, creative ways to raise climate finance. Madam Speaker, Fiji has demonstrated that the green capital markets can be created in emerging economies such as ours, and that all countries have an important role to play in facilitating climate solutions. By issuing the first emerging country green bond, Fiji is not only leading in climate advocacy, but is also setting the precedents for other nations to pursue innovative market instruments to address climate change. And by no means we are stopping here, Madam Speaker. We are working on getting our Fijian green bond listed on the London Stock Exchange. This will happen as soon as next month. In fact, Madam Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister will actually be opening the London Stock Exchange next month, when Fiji's green bond will be listed on the London Stock Exchange when he attends London for Chogam. Madam Speaker, London Stock Exchange is the world's premier listing choice, and by listing our green bonds on the London Stock Exchange, we will inevitably be raising Fiji's international profile amongst investors, especially those looking for green investments. The London Stock Exchange will also be working hard to promote Fiji's green bond and secure more international investors. As mentioned last week, Madam Speaker, there is a drastic need for increased private sector participation in climate finance and investing in Fiji's green bond in one way that the private sector can show its support for climate finance. It is also a mechanism for developed countries to support developing countries in their search for adequate climate and development finance. Finally, Madam Speaker, our Fiji's green bond is being considered for the Green Bond Pioneer Awards 2018, and we will know next week if we have won. This is a further endorsement of our leadership, even if we do not win the award, Madam Speaker, but we hope, fingers crossed, we will actually. Madam Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank local and foreign investors for continuing to show overwhelming support to Fiji's green bonds, and I urge more investors to invest in future Fiji green bond offerings. Additionally, we would like to thank the Green Bond Steering Committee, and in particular the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, for putting Fiji at the forefront of innovative climate finance and the IFC and the World Bank for the technical assistance. We'd also like to thank the Australian Government for funding the technical assistance for this important national undertaking, Madam Speaker. With those words, Madam Speaker, this is my update on the Fiji's green bond issue. Thank you.